Good morning, everybody. Out here about to fire up the old truck. Not running so hot. To be honest with you, it's usually worse than that. There it goes. That sounds more about what it normally sounds like. So we're gonna take it down to the shop, pop the hood on it, see what we can't figure out. Probably gonna tear it open, tear it apart, tear the front cover off, and go from there. Look at how loud that is. Woo. Got in a little bit of a hurry, got started. I got the top taken off of it. Just gonna go ahead and get this fan shroud out of here. Might even take that top hose off and just keep tearing on down so we can get the belt off and get into this front cover. Just gonna do a time lapse until I get into there and we'll see what's wrong with it. As we proceed with the disassembly, let me go ahead and preface all this by letting you know that this is a major repair. Much more major than just, let's say, swapping an engine. If you have one of these and you're not doing this yourself, you took it somewhere and they said you need an engine. The reason is because it only takes them a few hours to put in an engine, whereas this repair will take 6 hours, maybe 8 hours, depending on who's working on it. Even a proficient mechanic will take about 6 hours to do this. And then once you get in there, you know, you still got to have $1,000 worth of parts, essentially, if you're paying through a shop. So it's not a terrible job. If you're a good mechanic, it's not hard to do at all, but do be fair warned that this is labor intensive and it's going to take some time. Probably going to take you a whole weekend. Got a good portion of the front torn off. I think the time might shut off, but that's okay. You know, this is basically just tearing it all down. The important stuff is once we get to getting this front cover off, and really once we get this cover off so we can see what's going on inside here. It sounds atrocious. We even started up again yesterday with no belt or anything on it, and it's bad. It's right here, and it's real bad. So we're gonna go from there and see what we can't figure out. I'm just gonna get all these little accessories, these little pumps, all this evap stuff, these plastic pieces, just get all this mess off there. I'm gonna try to leave the throttle body on. I really don't know if it's gonna be possible. I mean, that's pretty tight. But I think it would slide off. It's all up in the way though. It'll probably end up having to come off, but I'm gonna try it, see what happens. I'm also gonna try to leave this hose on there. We'll see what happens. Alternator has to come off. What else? Alternator has to come off. The, of course, main pulley has to come off, and the AC compressor has to come off. First though, I have to drain all the oil out of it. I didn't think about it. This oil, of course, it runs, this chain of course runs in oil. I knew that, but it just didn't even click in my head. I've been so worried about getting this thing torn apart. I gotta get all the oil out of it. Already got all the water out of it and all, so once we get the oil out of it, we can just go ahead and continue to remove all this stuff. I'm gonna try to time lapse it out while I do it. But it's really cold out here, and I'm just not paying that much attention to the camera, so if it dies on me, don't hate me. Like I said, the important part's once you get all this off. If you can't get all this off, you got no business working in there. Alrighty, let's see what we can do. Don't let that last statement dissuade you. However, there is a lot of truth in it. If you can't figure out how to disconnect all the hoses and accessories, don't even attempt to take this cover off. Once you get this cover off is where the real work starts, and it's something that requires previous knowledge. I mean, you could probably watch a video similar to this one or this one and do it, but you'd have to have a good bit of mechanical foreknowledge to even be able to do that. So if this is the first time you've ever like really tried to work on the inside of an engine, you might want to press pause on this one, because this is pretty labor intensive. Now that being said, if you are familiar with the internals of engines, this is a pretty easy job. You'll see once we get in there and can get a good look at the chains, it's all pretty straightforward. It's not that big of a deal to someone like me. However, if you're not intimately familiar with how engines work, you might want to hold off. Also, that was some epic foreshadowing earlier. Not only is the throttle body going to have to come off, so is the intake. This little guy right here, I gotta unplug him and take that bracket off and pull that out. and then separate that from the block. It's already unbolted. Same with the alternator's already unbolted. So let's just pry all this stuff back real quick. Unfortunately, in the process of doing all this, my camera kept shutting off. However, it's pretty straightforward getting all the bolts out of this. Make sure and keep them on I use a piece of cardboard where they're marked. So that way you know exactly what bolt goes in what hole. You don't want to put the wrong one in the wrong hole. Some of them are too long. Alrighty, got all the bolts out of it. I didn't realize it, but my camera had shut off. I guess it had died or something. Got all the bolts off, got everything out. There's 2 on the bottom. Don't forget those 2 on the bottom. One of them you can still see dangling right there. I can't get it all the way out because the steering rack, but it is out of this part, so it should come off. I think it's got some dowel pins in it. At least it should, based on the way it's shaped. I assume there's something anchoring it more than those 2 bolts down there to align it. So probably got some pins. Probably just need to pull it out and slide it up. It was catching though. I was trying to pry it open. I couldn't get it open. I really think this bolt holds it on. Now, nothing says that it does, but I'm going to take it out and just see, because it really acts like something's holding on. So I'm going to try that, and if that works, I'm just going to go ahead and tear it on out and just keep rolling with the time lapse. So you do in fact have to remove this idler pulley. It does go all the way through to the block. That's what was holding my cover off. Once I got that bolt out of there, I can go ahead and start to pry the cover back very gently using the ears provided. Make sure and don't break anything off. It should come off pretty easily. This one's been on there for 250,000 miles and it still came off pretty easily because the gasket material's all shot out. Also, I forgot to mention earlier, it's a lot easier to get this cover off if you first remove these 2 cam covers that cover the cam phasers. Oh! I even bought a new scraper. Clean this beauty off. So I got it figured out. Look at that. Of course, as we know, or as we suspected, the tensioner for the secondary chain on this side is completely bad. It needs a new guide and tensioner. Both of these guides are also worn out pretty bad. This tensioner is also really weak. This guide and tensioner on this side seems to be fine, and this chain also appears to be fine, but I'm not sure. I guess we'll see when we take this side off what it looks like. The other thing is, he was just pointing out, what is that? Like, how does that even work? It doesn't grab real well. We were just spinning it all around, so I don't want to get my hands dirty again, but it's barely on there. Look at all that slack in there. So we don't even know if that's correct. So I'm going to do a little more research, see what I can't figure out, and we'll be back with some new tensioners and start putting it back together. Alright, so I got the cover off. I'm going to go ahead and crack these cams loose. I'm not going to take the bolts out, just simply break them loose. That way, when I get everything lined up right, I won't have to worry about, anything moving when I pull the bolt out of the middle of them. I'm only planning on taking these outside ones off. I'm going to try to somehow replace this tensioner with the chain on there, but we'll see when we get in there. Mostly though, right now, going to break these free, take that top tensioner off, and go ahead and clean up this engine case, and we'll also clean up the outer case as well. That way we got a good surface to seal back up, and then we can go into this timing system and start tearing it apart. So for right now, let's go ahead and get those broken loose, and we'll get moving. That's not good. Go with a little bit different approach for these. It keeps wanting to just advance the whole system. So I'm gonna put the impact on it, see what I can't do on getting those out. Already went ahead, got this all cleaned off, nice and clean all the way around, ready to go. I just got to get the very bottom of the pan right there, finish picking all that out, and it should be ready to roll. Everything's all good and clean. And then I can start taking off all this chain and assembly. So let's see if we can get these broken loose. To do this, it works best if you have an impact wrench or impact driver of some kind. However, if you don't, just make sure and hold this whole system properly, and you can back all these bolts out with a breaker bar. Okay, got all those bolts loose, all 4 of them on the top cams. Now I'm going to remove my rope out of the cylinder and rotate it around, make sure that I do have it in top dead center, and then I can start to take all this stuff off. So let's go ahead and perform that procedure now. If you're not exactly 100% sure how to get this at top dead center, it's pretty easy to look up. I don't want to go through it all right now because it takes a minute to explain. But essentially, you want the number one cylinder at the top, and you want to make sure all these timing marks also align as well. That way you know you are 100% at top dead center and not just with the number one cylinder at the top. You have to be at top dead center. Okay, so let's go from there. So as soon as I started trying to time out this engine, I noticed that to even get to the number one cylinder, you have to have the intake off of it. So most of this time I spent pulling off the intake simply so I could get to that number one cylinder. I'm putting spark plugs in it anyway, so it had to come off. It doesn't really matter. But you do have to take the intake off so you can get access to that cylinder to verify that it is at top dead center. Once you do that, it's pretty straightforward. It's not hard to go online, find the same diagram that I have, but I will show it to you later on in the video. And I'm sure you're wondering, and yes, I did reuse this intake gasket with no problems this time. If it has any damage, go ahead and replace it. So there's a few ways to find out if that cylinder's all the way at the top. The easiest way is just drop a 1/4 inch extension in there and follow it as it rises and falls and make sure you stop it at the top. Alright, so I got everything good and loose, all camshaft sprockets loose. I am at top dead center, did verify. We're a little off over here because of that pop, but I think it might have also already been off. I don't know. I've got one secondary chain, one main chain, all the tensioners, all the swing arms, all the plastic guides, everything. Well, let me show you what I got. So I only could get one secondary chain. I thought it was only probably gonna need one secondary chain. I probably should get another one. They're only $40, $45. I don't know. If you're doing this, replace them both. I'm just hard-headed. Main chain right there. And then we have, let's see. This is the swing arm. What is this? Oh, tensioner for the top. Left side tensioner. Right side tensioner. Main tensioner. Ultra grab course, blue Loctite just in case, some plugs, and a new front seal. This is not a cheap lot you're looking at. This is probably about $600 worth of parts, so be prepared, people. It gets expensive. So we have all this stuff: secondary chain, main chain, this part, this arm, that tensioner, and both the two top tensioners. The only thing I'm lacking is another one of these chains. So I'm gonna pull them all off real quick. We're gonna measure them and see. If it's not stretched, I'm gonna let this chain ride. I just don't know if it even looks questionable. I'm just gonna get another one, but we're gonna see where we're at for now, and then I'll go deeper into it. I'm gonna have to completely retime this thing because this one's so far out, so I don't know how this is gonna work. We're gonna see what we can do. We'll see how close we can get it. So we'll get cracking on it though and see what we can't do. Let's get this main chain off and these two secondaries off and at least see what we were working with and see if they're stretched out or not. A lot of foreshadowing in that previous speech. Also, this might look pretty complicated, but it's really not. You do have to pull both gears off essentially at the same time. There's no way to like slip the chain around and cheat it off. It's just easier to pull them both off at the same time. You got to retime the whole thing anyways. Executive decision time, people. If you see, look at that. You see that little piece of crustacean hanging on there? That's what it's supposed to look like. So that is not good. That is certainly the source of our problem. It's running across the top of this piston in there. That's what that clanking noise that I'm hearing is. Certainly on this one. See, you can even see where the top of the piston's punching through the plastic. So, hard decision. To get this out, as you can see, you got the pretty bolt right there on the front, but it's also got one right here in the back. And to get to that one, you got to take off all this mess, valve cover. Shoot, I don't even know. Valve cover's got to come off for sure, though. I'm not trying to do all that. This thing's got 200,000 miles. I just want it to make it like another 100,000. I'll be so happy. This is my spare vehicle. Do I recommend this on your primary vehicle? Of course not. But let's get real. No one's taking all that apart for a 200,000 mile car that's probably going to sit in their yard anyways. So what I'm going to do is, if you pull this out, let me put you on the stand here. So if you pull this out right here, this retaining pin, it allows this to come up, right? My old ones function properly. There's not anything wrong with them other than the plastic's gone. I think you could just replace the plastic. I'm gonna do one better. I'm gonna pull this whole piston and spring out of here and shove it up in my housing and pin it and put the new chains on it. I think that'll fix my problem. There's nothing inherently wrong with the aluminum part. It still flows oil. I don't see any reason to tear into this whole thing. So I'm gonna try to get away with that. Do I recommend it? No, but I don't think it's gonna be a problem. I guess we'll find out, but from everything I've researched, people just pop the plastic on there sometimes. So I think by swapping the whole piston, I'm going above and beyond in my mind. We're gonna swap all the other pieces down here because it does have some others on it. This shoe right here, the swing arm, all that's gonna get swapped out, and we're gonna change that one and that one. I still have to take this side off. I just haven't messed with it yet. We'll get it off too. I got new chains, new everything. Let's get cracking. So, speaking now that I have actually finished this, I've heard the car run and everything as I'm editing this video. I'm here to say the swap of the plunger and the plastic was the way to go. There was no advantages to spending all that time tearing apart the engine just to get a new piece of aluminum housing in there that didn't really need to be replaced anyways. It either works or it doesn't. Also, on the right-hand side here, it's pretty much the same thing as the left-hand side. Just have to get it torn apart, and then go ahead and swap the piston, swap the plastic, swap the spring on those, and go ahead and reassemble all the other tensioners as well, the swing arm, all that. Get everything ready to go. That way you can just put the chain on it, pull the pin, and let it tension up. Make sure when doing this that you put lubrication over all these parts. They do flow oil, but you want to oil this chain, all these guides, just oil everything. You can't go wrong. Just make sure and get it good and oiled. Assembly lube may even be better. Got another fresh, brand new secondary chain. We're gonna start trying to time this puppy out. I'm gonna start with this side since it's already almost there. You know, it's a lot closer. Then we'll move over here where we're gonna have to do a little bit of turn and a little bit of tweaking to align things properly. Alrighty, let's hop on. Like I just stated, this side's going to be a lot easier because it's already essentially in the right position. Do make sure, you know, that all your timing marks are in the right position. Everything faces up. I'm going to go through all that with you in just a second, but just make sure that the camshafts are in the correct orientation as far as the orientation they're supposed to be to the crank before you proceed. Easy way to tell, that little slit on the secondary gear, make sure it's facing directly at those valves, upward. Right at the ridge on the valve cover. As y'all know, I pretty well despise the engineering of all this and how this front cover comes off and all. Even though, you know, I'm getting into the K-series stuff and a lot of it's the same way. There's just a lot of small design elements of this that I'm not exactly cool with, that I think could have been much more improved. Now, where I will give credit where credit is due. This timing setup, as far as the secondaries go, spot on. Every mark is punched, and when you buy a new chain, they're marked. So all you have to do is make sure that your orange marks line up on these punches. There's 1, 2 on that one. On the back side of this, there's also a punch dot, and you gotta there's another orange one back here, and you make sure it lines up. When it does, you just slide this puppy on there and it is good to go. This whole setup right here, I have to admit, as far as, you know, this cam phaser secondary setup goes, I do think it's a pretty good setup. Oil does flow up into these, so, you know, they're gonna eat out, but what can you really do? But as far as the way the timing set goes together, this here is pretty good, pretty impressive, and should be pretty robust. Obviously, as you can see, the tensioner was falling apart and it was still running. I drove it in here. Alrighty, let's get to this side. This side's gonna be a little more complicated because I have to clock this one a little bit, which I guess I could just do that right now. So I did learn something important on this side. As you can see, we've got an orange mark on this one that's on the left, whereas the orange mark on that one's on the right. The punch marks on the sprocket are also different. Let me show you. See, on this one, we got 2 dots right there and 2 slashes where the chain marks line up. On this one, it will line up with the 2 dots and not the 2 slashes, which are on the other side. The reason for this is these gears are identical, obviously. They don't make a left and a right side gear, they just make a secondary gear. So if it's on that side, you have to use the slashes. If you're on this side, you have to use the dots. Keep that in mind. This one's been marked before. I imagine most of them are probably marked when they put them together. But just remember, dots on the left, slashes on the right, you'll be okay. So let's get this side timed up now. Here's our fresh chain. As you can see, it's got those 3 marks. The 2 go on the small one. The 1 goes on the big one. Let me show you. When you take this off, see how it's got the mark on the outside. But you see how it's got that dot right there? That's where that mark needs to go. It needs to sit right on that dot, just like that. Not like that. Not like that, but right over the dot. Boop. Okay, once you got that, now you got to get these 2 on those 2 dots, which is a whole nother process. But you just line them up. See, that would be 1 off, so you gotta go down 1 more. Okay, there it is. If you notice, see, right over the dot, right over the dot, that's where you want it. Now this is free spinning. Obviously you saw how I slid that out so that I could free spin it. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna roll it back until it aligns with the keyway. Then you can slide it on and then use the other gear to roll it back until that one aligns with the keyway. Slide it on, put your bolts in, done. Got the other one timed, as you can see. Our 2 dots line up in there. Our dot lines up. We're all good. Now these might not necessarily be in the right position compared to the crank at the moment. But that's another problem. So that's something that you have to work out once you get all these. You first have to time these secondaries completely. And then we can work on rotating these into the right position in order to be able to time them with the main pulley. Same thing with these. They also, if you buy a new chain, it comes with links that are marked. So we got a brand new chain here. As you can see, it has these 2 blue bluish links. I don't know if you can pick it up on camera, but they're different colored links. Those will go on your timing marks on your sprockets. Once again, they don't make two different sprockets, so make sure you are lining it up with the correct indentation, because it's going to be different for each sprocket, because one's on the left and one's on the right. And then down here, you got a nice golden colored link. That's the one that goes on the crankshaft pulley. So when you're done, you will have one here, the one at the very bottom. You can't really see because the radiator cap, but that's how it'll work. I'm about to show you how to time this out completely. I just got to find a better camera location so you can see what all's going on in here. And the way I like to do these, even if it's a belt, I prefer to do it this way, but especially with a chain, is you line up your left mark or your right mark, depending on which way the engine rotates. You then pull that cam around until you can line up the next mark. And once you have those two aligned and you're also in the correct position, you should be able to throw this straight down there on the crank pulley. Now, if it does not line up, one of these is out. So you have to make sure both of these are in the exact correct position before all this will line up with the crankshaft and the keyway. But when it is right, it will line up, this will fall on, and it is literally almost impossible to not have this in proper time. If you follow all these instructions, you make sure all these markings are right. I'm going to try to drop a picture of the diagram that I have in here, because the only thing I have literally looked at the entire time doing this job is this diagram. You should look at the torque specs for all this stuff. All this stuff has a certain inch pound it's supposed to be torqued to. I don't know if I'll do that. I'll probably just guess, because I know usually what these things need to be torqued to. I might check these simply because they're on a phaser, but I might just put them to the K24 spec and let them ride. So we'll see. But make sure if you're doing this at home, check all your specifications. Make sure everything's right. Double check, make sure everything's good and tight. But when it is, this should just slide on there. Everything should be correct, and it will all line up. If it does not line up, something is off. Just go back through it, do it again. Like I said, it doesn't matter if you have to do this 10 times right now, as long as it's right when you put that cover back on there. That's the important part, because you do not want to have to do all this twice. Like I stated previously, this is one of those jobs where it's either right or it's not, and you'll know when it's right. All the marks will line up. Fun story though, I have had to do this 3 times before on one with a belt that does not have such good markings, as I would get one cam out a tooth and the other cam would be out of tooth. It took me to the 3rd time till I finally got it right. And if it's out of tooth, it will literally just idle and nothing else. Even if you mash the gas pedal, it won't go above like 1500 RPMs. And so it has to be in time or it will not run right. If even one of these cams is out, it will not run right. So just take your time and make sure and get it all correct now. There you go, folks. Probably not the proper way to do it, but a way to do it. And it's all on there. So you got that little bit of slack right there, which is proper. Main thing is that link is lined up with that. If that link is not on that direct spot, you're gonna have problems. So gold link on the dot. If you look up here, blue link, cobalt link on the dot, cobalt link on the dot. In theory, we should now be timed. So now we can do what we've been wanting to do, which is take out this one. I forgot to mention earlier, as soon as you time the secondaries, you want to go ahead and pull those pins before you start putting on this main chain. I forgot to mention it earlier, but do make sure you pull all those pins as you proceed. You want to pull them off as soon as you get that chain on there and it tightened down. There it is, people. I had to get a little bit of help to hold the whole apparatus while I tightened all this down. But as you can see, we are still on our timing marks. Everything's all good. And I wanted to show you better. You can see that cobalt link on that dot. Where are we at over here? Cobalt link on that dot. Everything lines up. Same down here. Now we have the brass link on that dot. So everything is all together, well, just like it should be. And all I gotta do now, make sure everything in here is tight, all these are tight. It's just time to go ahead and crank on down time to go ahead and pop back on our cover. Make sure everything's good there and start tightening it on up. So let me go ahead. I've already prepared the cover. I've already prepared this side. Got all the excess oils off of it. Make sure there's nothing dripping out that can ruin your RTV. And we are pretty much ready to roll. We've gotten all the chunks out. Anything we could see that was gonna be an immediate issue. And it is now time to pull the paper out of the bottom and go for it. So I guess let's go ahead and start siliconing up this top and getting it ready. So personally, I prefer ultra gray. It seems to work better, but you probably could get away with high temp red. Just make sure whatever you're using on here is resistant to oil, obviously. Make sure and don't use too much though, because it will squeeze out as you start to tighten it. I did not even realize this till right now, y'all. Look at that. That's right where the water pump goes. That chain was riding the inside of this cover, and I mean, it's deep. That groove is so deep. It's probably hard to tell on camera, but it ate away a good chunk. There's no holes there or anything, but man, it did eat through it. So I got a good, nice, thin coat all the way around this puppy. Time to settle it on down into place and seal it on up. Make sure the bottom bolts aren't still stuck in it like mine was. It did make it a little harder to get in. It may require a little bit of movement once you get it down in there to slip it around the AC compressor. Okay, got it all back on there. All my screws back in it from my diagram. And we are good to go. Got a few more holes down there that are empty that I got to put screws in. We're going to get to those very, very soon. They're all parts of the brackets and mounts. The only reason they're not on there yet. But all the rest of them are. They've all been cinched down good. So now all we got to do is let this thing tack up and we can put all the rest of them on. Time to get these cam covers back on, idler, pulley, just all the accessories, everything else. So just gonna throw you on the time lapse, throw all this back together, and then we'll go from there. I also gotta put the intake back on, but I'm gonna save that for last, so let's roll. Sorry about the previous scene there, my camera had overheated again. At this point, I'm just trying to get this thing back together. I know I should have been paying more close attention to the camera. However, when you've been working on something this long, you really are just trying to get it done. You're more focused on it. My apologies. However, at this point, you've gleaned the useful knowledge, which is how to time this thing. I mean, to be honest with you, I know it sounds kind of harsh, but if you can't take apart and put these parts back together, you have no business working inside that timing system. It's not very complicated, but at the same time, it's complicated enough that if you can't figure out how to take this thing apart and put it back together, you really don't need to be playing with that timing system. All this is pretty straightforward. You're just removing components, removing accessories, reinstalling components and accessories. Very, very straightforward. Like I said, you know, so much stuff has to come off of this, the fan, all that. It all comes off really easy. It's all pretty straightforward, at least on this vehicle. Some vehicles, you know, a lot of this stuff can have like hidden bolts and stuff to make it complicated. This one's really not like that. Other than the two bolts that come up through the bottom of the oil pan, there's not really anything hidden that's going to keep you from being able to do this. Also, don't forget, you know, that one goes through the side of the AC compressor into this housing as well. But as long as you keep those in mind, it's really not that bad. So just slowly getting it all strapped back together. I think my camera does overheat yet again, but such is life. You know, like I said, you got the useful part, which is how to time it. Gonna do a little bit better in the future. Gonna keep a better eye on it. And I did even get a new GoPro, so hopefully that'll help a lot more with it overheating and things of that nature. We'll see what happens. Maybe we'll swap cameras. Been a pleasure. Hope you enjoy it. Make sure and get everything tightened and torqued correctly. Don't do like me and just run them down. Also, make sure and let the cover set up before you start to tighten it. Sorry about that, folks. The GoPro got a little hot and overheated, but all I did was put these last few pieces of plastic on there, nothing serious. We're going to finish getting it put back together. I think it's got like 4 bolts left and then some oil, and we'll be ready to fire it on off. I would probably recommend at this point, like firing it up before you screw all this down, but I'm fairly confident that this one's gonna run, so I'm just gonna go ahead and put it back together. If you're not 100% sure, and just don't create extra work for yourself. One more little footnote on this previous statement. If you're very unsure on whether or not you have it in time correctly, just roll it over a few times and make sure all those marks still line up. If they do, you can go ahead and slap the cover back on this thing and put it back together. There's no real reason to stop halfway. All right, fully reassembled, everything back together. You remember what it sounded like before? Get ready to hear what it sounds like now. Hopefully, we're good to go. You need to still have some water to it. No way cold. Well, there you have it, folks. Quiet as a church mouse. Still needs a coil on the number 6 cylinder. I thought it was just so bad out of time that it was missing, but apparently it does genuinely need a coil. Luckily for us, number 6 is safe to be reached. I know it's dark out here, so you can't really see it, but it's the one in the very back. You can actually get to it without taking the intake off, so we'll buy a coil for it tomorrow, see if that doesn't smooth out our problem. My guess is it probably will. Had good compression on that cylinder, so not worried about it. But as you hear, no more clickety-clack. Silent as can be. That's a win. Alrighty folks, y'all have a wonderful day. We will see y'all soon.